Olá, bom dia. Espero que me consigam ouvir. Desde já quero agradecer a vossa presença neste webinar. Espero que seja o primeiro de muitos. A apresentação vai ser feita pelo Manoj e já tem também muitos anos de experiência com o DrayTek. E caso queiram depois colocar questões durante a sessão, estejam à vontade, tem a secção de perguntas, podem colocá-las, tentaremos então depois responder às mesmas. Ok? Obrigado. Manoj?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Faru. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this DrayTek presentation. My name is Manoj Khatri. I'll be presenting today's webinar. DrayTek products are very feature-rich. There's a lot of functionality, and so we want to cover some of those features in this webinar. But we won't be able to cover everything, but we do have quite a lot of material that we're going to go through. And so hopefully you will find the presentation enjoyable and informative as well. DrayTek is a great brand of routers, access points, switches, and DrayTek also has management software that will help you to manage your whole estate of DrayTek products. Whether they are on one site or on multiple sites, the management software can manage all of those. So just before we get started, just a quick slide on the webinar interface. And you're welcome to ask questions at any point here. You've got the questions option there on the panel, on the webinar panel. And Ru is on, so he'll be able to answer your questions. We will also have a questions and answers at the end of the presentation as well, and we'll cover some questions then as well. Also, at the end of the presentation, when you disconnect, we're going to have a survey, and we would like to encourage everybody to complete the survey. It will help us to improve our content, and you can make suggestions on future webinars as well that you might want, what type of webinars, what content you want as well. And we also want to know if you've learned something during this presentation as well, which is really the key to our webinars. To encourage you to complete the survey, we also have a special gift for the first 5 respondents. So at the end of the presentation, and when we're finished, the first 5 people who complete the survey, you'll receive a special gift, and hopefully you'll like that gift. Okay, great. Just a few contacts here. As I said, my name is Manoj Khatri. I'm doing the presentation this morning. Your local reseller in Portugal is Vicious, and the contact there is Ru. He's the product and technical manager, and you can see on this slide his email address and his telephone number. So you're welcome to give Ru a call, and he can give you more information about DrayTek and DrayTek products. Okay, today's agenda in the presentation is this. I've got an introductory slide on DrayTek, the company, where it's come from, what it's been doing, its staff, etc. Then I'm going to move on to product lines. I'll talk a bit about what products DrayTek make, the features and functionality, the naming conventions, how you identify a product by its code, and what features that it has by that as well. Then we'll look at a few key functionalities of a DrayTek routers. And in that presentation, in that those few slides, I'll be covering 2-factor authentication. I'll cover VPN, because one of the key features of DrayTek is that VPN is built in. There's no subscription or anything like that. The product comes with VPN capabilities, so we'll cover that. Another great feature is policy root, and this is a very powerful feature that many DrayTek customers make use of, and it gives them a good deal of flexibility in managing their outbound traffic. We'll cover DrayDDNS. So DrayDDNS is a great feature that's been introduced in the last few years. There are many other DDNS providers, but DrayTek have their own, so it's a good choice to go with DrayTek rather than to go with anyone else. Bandwidth management is a very key feature in DrayTek products. It gives a huge amount of flexibility and functionality in managing outbound traffic, and we'll cover some of those aspects as well. Web content filtering. A lot of customers use web content filtering. In DrayTek products, web content filtering is the only part of the functionality that is subscription-based, an annual subscription, but it's a low-cost subscription, and I'll cover how you set that up and what you're able to do with that. At the end of the presentation, I've just got a few slides on wireless and mesh. Wireless is a very mature technology now. DrayTek also have mesh, so I'm going to cover a few slides on mesh. The whole presentation should be around 45 to 50 minutes. And we may have a few questions at the end, so looking at finishing around 11 o'clock, just for your timings. Okay, so let's start with talking about DrayTek. Let's first look at DrayTek's headquarters here. So you can see in this slide, that's the DrayTek building in Hsinchu in Taiwan. If you've been to Taiwan and to Hsinchu, that's a great center there. Hsinchu is a center for all IT. There are lots of other manufacturers are also based there as well, in the same city, Hsinchu, and that's where DrayTek is as well. Products take a long time to make and a good deal of energy and resources to develop. But you can see from this slide that DrayTek have 60% of its staff in the R&D department. Getting the right balance of sales, marketing, and development really makes a difference to products. And DrayTek is ahead here, where they have a lot of staff doing R&D. So R&D are engaged in getting all those features and functionality in the product and getting them to work. And I think DrayTek do a really, really good job at that. And that's why there are so many great features in DrayTek products. Okay. So a little bit more about DrayTek. DrayTek was founded in 1997, 25 years ago. It was started by a group of very experienced engineers in the networking field. They got together and they formed DrayTek, the company. In the early days, one of their first products that they released was an ISDN terminal adapter, and you can see that on this slide here. I did use one of these terminal adapters actually some time ago. That technology now, ISDN, is long gone, but you can see how DrayTek started with ISDN products. By the way, DrayTek in Chinese means staying at peace where you are. So that's their kind of company name and its meaning. DrayTek was launched on the stock market in Taiwan just 7 years after it was launched. And so DrayTek is now on the stock market. It has shareholders, but they do a very good range of products which we're going to cover in this presentation. So let's look a little bit more on DrayTek's product lines. What exactly does what DrayTek make? So if we look at this slide here, DrayTek's mission is to provide high quality networking devices, and they really do make high quality products. I know many customers who are still using DrayTek products that were installed 10, 12 years ago. I don't know if you know the model numbers, but for example, DrayTek's router 2820, this product is at least 12 years old, and I still know some customers in the UK, certainly, who are using that 2820. So DrayTek products are very robust. They're built to last. And so there's no compromises on features and security. All the current products will be We'll have regular updates on firmware, and the firmware is not subscription based. It's a free download. You can upgrade it, and it will have all the latest features and security measures built in. The product range includes routers, wireless access points, managed switches, and also management software. Now, management software you can buy that will manage all of your DrayTek products. And anything that you can do from the web interface, you'd be able to do from the management software. I'm just going to take a step. So, as I said, DrayTek products are very reliable, they're very robust, and they're very feature rich. And feature rich means that it has a lot of functionality. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later as we go through this presentation. Okay, so in terms of products, we've got router products. So DrayTek make a big range of routers, and the sort of functionality which are in the products is broadband. So you've got broadband, you've got Ethernet, LTE, and you've got fiber. And that basically will cover all kinds of connectivity for internet that you would want from a router. In terms of access points, there are wall mounted, ceiling mounted, you can have desktop, you can have with or without antennas, you can have medium density or high density devices, and by that I mean how many users you can have on there. You can have an access point that will handle 20 users, or you can have an access point, an enterprise access point that can handle 100 plus users, so that's high density. DrayTek also make a good range of Ethernet switches, from Ethernet switch to power over Ethernet as well, and power over Ethernet will power DrayTek's own access points, but the power over Ethernet can also power IP phones and IP cameras if you have those in your environment as well. And of course, I've mentioned about the network management software, Viger ACS. Viger ACS is available as a server tool to run on a Linux-based server, or you can run it on a Windows server, and it will help to manage your whole estate of DrayTek products. The foundation of the company is routers though, and so DrayTek have a huge focus on routers, and there are many, many different models of routers depending on your requirements. But as I said, DrayTek also make a wide range of access points for all markets, from small single APs to multiple APs in a mesh configuration as well. So let's look at some of the core features and functionality. As you'd expect, one of the big features in DrayTek is VPN, and VPN has been in DrayTek products since it started, and so that's one of the key features. Load balancing. If you've got multiple internet connections coming in, and that could be fiber, it could be DSL, it could be Ethernet, then DrayTek products is able, a DrayTek router is able to load balance traffic across those different WAN ports, and that gives you redundancy, or it gives you failover as well, or it can give you both. Routers have a great firewall capability as well, and it ensures that your network is secure and no one's going to be able to break in. There are a lot of features for firewall settings in the routers, from logging in protection using two-factor authentication to protection against all kinds of DOS attacks or anything like that. The router has protection for all of those things. So it has very, very good firewall capabilities. And of course, central management. I mentioned DrayTek Viger ACS. ACS is able to manage all of the routers, access points, and switches as well. even if the access points are in the local area network and they don't have a public IP address, DrayTek is also DrayTek Vigra ACS is also able to manage those even if they have a local IP. It uses STUN to connect to the access points. So key features: VPN is included on all products without subscription. Load balancing if you're using multiple WANs. Full feature firewall and centralized management capabilities. Let's look at naming conventions. I've highlighted the 2900 series and the 3000 series routers. They're the ones that have the dual WAN and the quad WAN capabilities. So you can have a fiber coming in, a fiber might be terminated on a termination unit, and it might have Ethernet coming out. You take that Ethernet and you plug it into a DrayTek WAN port, and you've got their internet connectivity using that. So we've got dual WAN routers. We do have single WAN routers as well. And the single WAN router means that it might have more than one WAN interface, but only one of the WANs can be up at any one time. So it gives you failover, but not load balance. Whereas the 28 series, the 29 series, and the 3000 series, they are all enterprise units, and you can have multiple WANs that can load balance or failover with all of your WANs. Okay, let's take a look at the interface and the naming convention in a little bit more detail. Any product that has a V is going to support voice terminal, voice ports, and so it's got built-in VoIP ports that you can use SIP. You can use calls, or you can plug in a phone to it. But that's an analog phone on the SIP ports. You can use IP phones on any of the DrayTek routers, as an IP phone is just treated as a normal Ethernet device, so you can just plug that in. I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Any product that has an F at the end of the code means that it's got a fiber WAN port, and so you can plug in an incoming internet connection on a fiber directly into the WAN port. Yeah. Any router that has an L in the model number means that it supports LTE, and LTE models have a built-in SIM slot that you can insert a SIM card, a data SIM card, and you can get internet through the SIM card. On switches, any product that's got a P is a PoE switch, so it has power over Ethernet, and it can provide power to access points, it can provide power to IP phones, or it can provide power to IP cameras. These are the sort of key devices that you would normally have in your environment for power over Ethernet. And any switch that has an X means it supports 10 gig on that connection. So there are many products that have many switch products that have an X, and they're going to be supporting gigabit speeds. That means you might have a server, and if that's connected to the internet, and if it's a web server, you want to give it a lot of bandwidth, then you can use a fiber connection to that server, and that will give you a 10 gig connection to the local server, and that's a great feature that DrayTek have. And there's enough backplane capacity to handle that 10 gig throughput from on the switch. Okay, let's look at actual model numbers in terms of Wi-Fi. Any router that has AC is going to be supporting 2.4 and 5 gig bands, and for 2.4 it will support 802.11bgn, and for 5 gig it will support AN and AC. Products with VAC will have voice ports and also support the AC, And the next product there you can see is a LTE router, and anything with an L and AC is going to support, is going to have a SIM slot in there. It's going to be wireless, and it's going to support AC in terms of wireless. DrayTek have also released recently AX products, and this is Wi-Fi 6, and those products will have an AX at the end of the model numbers. Okay, here are some typical model numbers then for DrayTek. DrayTek 2927, this is an Ethernet dual WAN router, but doesn't have wireless. 2927AC is a dual WAN Ethernet router, but comes with wireless, so it supports wireless AC, ABGN-AC. 2927 LAC is an AC router with a built-in SIM slot, so you can put a SIM card in there, a data SIM card, and have an internet connection through that medium. 2927 AX is the Wi-Fi 6 router with dual Ethernet WAN. 2927 FLVAC will have it's wireless, it will have a fiber port, it will have LTE, and it will have voice as well. So this is a router that has got multiple functionalities there as well. The 2962 is a high performance dual Ethernet WAN router, and that can be rack mounted. Actually, all of these products can be rack mounted. There's a rack mounting bracket that's available that you can rack mount all of these as well. The 2962 also has rack mounting capabilities, and it's a high performance dual Ethernet WAN router. 3910 is an enterprise router that has multiple WAN ports. I think it has 4 WAN ports, and it can be used as a VPN concentrator. It supports up to 500 VPNs. Okay, so that's just some examples of model numbers for DrayTek products. In terms of WAN, it supports ADSL, VDSL, fiber directly in, LTE SIM. You can use a dongle with a SIM card in there for USB connection. It has the Ethernet WAN, and this nice little feature for wireless WAN is it can be a client on the wireless side, but that wireless client can be used as a WAN interface. So then that wireless client can be shared as an internet connection for its LAN users. And that's a nice little feature. If you go to a hotel or something and you set up a DrayTek router, you can connect to the hotel's Wi-Fi and use that as a WAN connection on a DrayTek router for its LAN site. And that's a nice little feature that DrayTek have. Let's look at some of the other baseline features. I've highlighted the Ethernet load balancing here. So this is one of the key features that DrayTek have. If you've got WAN 1, WAN 2, WAN 3, WAN 4, you can load balance traffic across all of those. And we'll talk a little bit more about load balancing and how traffic can be routed to different WAN ports as well. Firewall and content filtering. This is extensively used by customers to manage their inbound traffic on their for internet connectivity. Quality of service. Quality of service is a great feature in DrayTek that provides flexibility for managing outbound traffic and controlling bandwidth as well. So if you have limited bandwidth, or you want to assign bandwidth for certain users, or you want to set aside bandwidth for certain types of protocols, then you can do that in DrayTek. So just to highlight some of the features: multiple WAN with load balancing, wireless as well, wireless and mesh features, VPN with no subscriptions, firewall and content filtering, and bandwidth management. These are just some of the key features, but there are many, many others that I'm going to talk about or go through in this presentation briefly. Okay, so this is typically a GUI interface for a DrayTek router. This is the 2927 AC model. And I just wanted to show you on this screen what you see here on the web interface, the configuration menu options here, is really only the sort of tip of the iceberg. There are many configuration options which are hidden, not hidden, but in those menu options that allow you to do quite a lot of detailed configuration. So what you see on the menus is sort of like the tip of the iceberg, but there are lots and lots of other configuration options under there. And sometimes it does take a little bit of support to tap into those great features that DrayTek have. And that gives a lot of flexibility and a lot of applications when you're specifying a DrayTek product for one of your customers. Okay, let's look at router login, and I just want to very briefly talk about how you can make your router logons very secure. And very secure means logging in with two-factor authentication. You can set up two-factor authentication logon on any DrayTek router, and that means that when you log in, you'll need to use your mobile phone using something like Google Authenticator to get a code from that. You put the code in and it will then log you into the router. When you've got Google Authenticator set up, in order to set this up, you go into the router's menu option, you select two-factor authentication, that then pulls up this the scan code there. You scan that on your mobile phone, and that then sets up the two-factor authentication for login. So every time you log in, then you use a PIN number that you get from your Google Authenticator code on your mobile phone, cell phone, and then that logs you in. So it's almost impossible to log in without that. And DrayTek is very secure. Even if you take a configuration backup of the router, it doesn't show you any of the setup of the router. All the configuration in the file is encrypted, so you can't read any of those. So it is very secure. Google Authenticator is one of the good ones to use, but there are others that you can use as well. I've used Authy as another authenticator, and I've also used Google Authenticator as well. So that sets up a very secure login to your router. Okay, let's look at VPN. What is VPN? I think we know what VPN is, but I'm just going to very briefly cover VPN. VPN is a virtual private networks. I'm going to cover two types of VPNs. You've got remote dial-in users and you've got LAN-to-LAN users. In the UK, when we had lockdown, when COVID started 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of people were working from home, and suddenly a lot of customers discovered that DrayTek was a great product to have in people's homes because it allowed them to have a VPN into their office. Into their offices, and we saw a huge increase in sales of DrayTek routers for home users who were using them to dial into their offices to get connection to all the services that they had in their offices using remote dial-in as well. So you've got two types. You've got remote dial-in and you've got LAN to LAN. This is just an illustration of what LAN to LAN would look like and remote dial-in looks like. Remote dial-in is a single user in a network. They use a VPN client, which is available from DrayTek as a download. Again, there's no cost to that. You download the VPN client, you set up the client to dial to your head office router, and you can get a secure VPN connection that effectively connects you to the office, and that's the same as you being in the office with your laptop or your desktop. LAN to LAN means that you've got two routers that are connected together, and it connects two sites together. It could be a head office, it could be a branch office, but you can have multiple branch offices as well, all connecting back to the head office as well. So in terms of protocols, DrayTek supports the standard protocol. So PPTP, L2TP, IPsec, SSL, OpenVPN as well. These are all supported. These days, PPTP is not so much used because it's not as secure as IPsec using IKE2 or SSL. In terms of authentication, you've got a range of authentication methods that you can use. You've got Radius. You can use LDAP authentication. You can use TACACS. More commonly, people will be using TOTP or just simply pre-shared keys. And if you really wanted to make it super secure, you can use X509. X509 is a little bit more complex. It uses certificates, but it does mean that it's very secure, but it is more difficult to set up. If you're a techie and you like a good challenge, then I'd encourage you to try a VPN using an X509 method and authentication. In terms of security, we've got DES, triple DES, AES, SHA. Out of those, AES is probably the most commonly used and is generally regarded as very, very secure. There are tens of thousands of DrayTek routers with VPNs using AES, using pre-shared keys, using SSL, and using IPsec as their protocols. Let's take a sip of water. Okay, SSL VPN, so it's a single user. I look at the settings, and if you are using SSL for your remote dial-in user, I'd change the port. The default port is 443, which is the same as what the web interface uses, but if you change that to something else, then that just keeps it separate from the web interface. In terms of setup on the router, you go into the router, you pick a free VPN profile, you select the protocols that you'd like to use. On this one, they're all selected, but you set the protocol that you want to use. You can set the username and password up if you're using SSL, or if you're using two-factor authentication, you can then scan the code. And once you've got that code set up and you've got the VPN client set up with the same settings as in the router, you can then dial in using the remote dial-in VPN client, and you can use SSL or you can use a two-factor authentication to dial into VPN, and that gives you a secure connection to your head office site. For LAN to LAN, you've got two offices that you're going to connect together, and one could be a head office, the other could be a branch office. The branch office might have IP phones as well. They will connect into the LAN, and that once the VPN is up, those phones will then register into the PBX at the router site, the B site, and the phone will then work just as if it was on the local network there. So it connects those two networks together. Typically, you would keep the subnet separate and use a VPN that then links the two sites together. How you set that up in the router is pick a free VPN profile, give the profile a name. One site from the A and B would be dial out, so select dial out, then go into the dial out settings, select IPsec using IKE2, and in this case we're using pre-shared keys here, so choose a sort of a fairly long and complex pre-shared key. You need to enter the IP address of the remote site that you want to connect to, and that's where the server IP is. Let's just pass some of these. Oh yes, set the IKE advanced settings. As I said, AES in main mode is a good one to choose there. You don't really need to change any of the other settings. You do need to enter the remote network, and that's the remote network that you're going to connect to. And the remote subnet mask. What that does, it puts an entry in this router's routing table that says that network is found via the VPN, and that's what that TCP/IP settings for the remote network says. So once you've got those settings done, as I said, you select the pre-shared key, and on the router B, you choose a free profile, give it a profile name, enable the profile. This time you choose dial in. So the previous one was dial out. This one is dial in. You set up the dial in features using IPsec for dial in type. You set the pre-shared key. You enter the remote gateway. So this is the WAN IP of the remote site that you're going to be connecting to. As I said, you put the pre-shared key in, which is the same pre-shared key as you entered in router A. You use AES for authentication. You now put the reverse of what you did at the other site. So you've got the remote network and the gateway of the other side. And you save those settings. And hopefully, if everything is correct, you can check to see if your VPN is up by going into connection management. And what you should see here is a green connection information there that then shows you that your VPN is up. Green means that it's encrypted. Okay, we're going to need to speed up a bit because it's taken a little bit longer. So policy route is similar to firewall, but instead of blocking or allowing traffic, policy route makes decisions on which interface traffic should use for outbound traffic. So here's an example here. You can choose any type of protocol that you're going to route via a particular WAN. So you can use TCP, UDP, both ICMP. You can have any source, so anything from a particular IP address or a range of IP addresses go out on a particular WAN type as well. You've got destination. You can choose destination as well, or port, destination port. You might want to port, for example, you might want to port all FTP traffic on port 25 to WAN 2 or something, which is what you can do with policy route as well. A quick example of this is just routing all outbound traffic from 192.168.1.10, and that is going to route all of that traffic from that one single IP address on its LAN side to the VPN. And here you can see that it's choosing the VPN interface to route that traffic out. So policy route is a very powerful feature. I'd encourage you to have a look at that. There are lots of documentation that show you how to set that up. DrayDDNS. So just a quick slide on that. You don't need to use any other providers DDNS service. You can use DrayTek, DrayTek's own. They provide this service. It's particularly helpful where you've got a dynamic IP, so your IP isn't fixed. And if you want to use that in VPN, for example, you can use DrayDDNS. Once you've set the account up with MyVigor, you can then have multiple records on there as well. So you can have multiple addresses for your domain names, and it costs nothing to set this up. DrayTek provide this service for free of charge, and you only need to register it once and renew it once a year. And once you renew it, then that gives you another year's of service for that. So the way to set it up is just go on to the router's configuration, go to the dynamic DDNS setup, pick a free profile, and in the profile, select DrayDDNS. You need to choose your domain that you'd like to use. So it will be something.drayddns.com. And once you register that, then that becomes the domain that you can use. Okay, bandwidth management. So this is a very, very powerful features in DrayTek. Let's quickly look at what you can do in terms of bandwidth management. The first option there at the top, if you enable that, you can set bandwidth limits for all your LAN users. So it's per user. Each user then will have, in this example, 2 meg up and 2 meg down, and that's the maximum bandwidth that each user can use. You can apply bandwidth limits to a range of IP addresses using the IP object range or group as well. And you can then set up for that group or that range of IP addresses, they can share a bandwidth limitation, or each of them can have their own depending on what you set in those settings there for TX and RX as well. But there is an auto adjustment utility as well. And if you select that, what that does is it allocates available bandwidth for where there is limitations. And that just means that you're using up your bandwidth rather than it just being sitting there not being used. And that's a great feature. So you can use a combination of these bandwidth limitations to really control how much traffic is managed outbound from your LAN users. With bandwidth management, we've also got quality of service, and there are three types of this. You've got traffic classification, you've got traffic queuing, and you've got traffic priority. If you're looking to the DrayTek router there, you've got hardware quality of service and you've got software quality of service. What you do here is you set your outbound speed, egress there, and what you can do is to set the three classes of quality of service. So you've got class 1, class 2, and class 3, and what those percentages do is allocate the maximum bandwidth for that class of traffic. Once you've got that done, what you do then is to assign particular applications to those classes of bandwidth. I know I'm going a little bit quick, but I think what I would encourage you to do is to have a look at this really very powerful feature in DrayTek that will manage your bandwidth. So if we look at what it does on a kind of pictorial, you can prioritize web traffic, but that's just a tick box, and you tick that and that will prioritize SIP and RTP traffic. You could categorize VPN as class 1 to give it more bandwidth. You can categorize HTTPS traffic in class 2, FTP in class 3, and others in a other category as well. And this is where you actually would set that up. It's important to know that the egress and ingress, the speeds, you'll need to ensure that they are accurate by doing a speed test. So you put the correct numbers in there. Otherwise, the percentages of those traffic, isn't accurate. So you need to ensure that it is accurate. So in this example, you've got 10% for class 1. So DNS traffic will only use 10% of the 100 meg bandwidth, whereas class 2, which is HTTPS traffic, will use 50% of that 100 meg bandwidth. So HTTPS traffic has got 50 meg of bandwidth as it is assigned here in this example. And class 3 is 25% and others are 15%. You can see the status at the end of that. If you let this run for a day or 2 days or a week, if you click the status, it gives you the traffic that's being used by each class as well, and how much bandwidth is being used. So it's a nice way to kind of see what the effect of your quality of service settings have had on your network. Another way to assign the class is to go to the applications under bandwidth management and app QoS, and you can just find particular applications and then set an set a quality of service to them. Here you can see for DNS, I've chosen class 2, and for FTP, I've chosen class 2 as well. But for HTTP traffic, it's class 1. There's quite a lot of flexibility here. For example, one of those happens to be Netflix. So you can assign a very low bandwidth for Netflix users if you wanted to in your network. So there's a lot of flexibility here, and there's quite a bit of preset applications that you can just set the quality of service and the class of bandwidth that you'd like to set on that. So very, very flexible, very powerful feature. Let's quickly look at web content filtering. The web content filtering, again, lots of customers are using this. It's subscription based and it's based on website categories. So let's take a look at that. WCF, it's category driven web content filtering. It can be used on any DrayTek router. Access to websites is controlled by category, but you can also use keyword match. You can use DNS or IP or even site categories as well. It's supplied by DrayTek, but it's serviced by Siren. and there is an annual subscription for using Global View, which is the web content filtering provided by Siren on the router. Let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So you do need a MyVigor account in order to use the to register the subscription-based web content filtering. But to create an account, it doesn't cost anything. It's free of charge. So you can create an account at MyVigor and then go into the router to activate your subscription. Once you've got your subscription activated, you must be wondering what the profiles are in the middle of that screen here on the configuration. You've got web content filter profile table. And what you can do is to select the profile, and here now you're going to kind of decide what you would like to block with the web content filtering subscription. In this example, it's going to block out those sites which are ticked. So you've got criminal activity sites, you've got illegal drugs, school cheating, not quite sure what that is, and you've got some other sites there that the router will block once you apply this profile to its firewall rule. So the subscription is what allows you to set these up, and once you've set these up, you apply them to the firewall, and it will then block out those sites. If anyone tries to get onto those sites which are blocked, they'll get a message to say this site is blocked by administrator. Please talk to your administrator for further information. So it's a nice way to control which or to block access to undesirable sites. A lot of schools, a lot of colleges, and a lot of homes with children use the subscription-based web content filtering to control what their children use and access as well. You can also apply a schedule that blocking can only be between certain hours of the day and certain days of the week. So you can apply a schedule as well, and that's another feature that that is in DrayTek as well, DrayTek routers. Okay, as I said, so web content filtering by application. You've also got, well, this is the same screen, so you've got there lots of applications that you can apply to block without subscription. So if you want to block any of these, you don't need the subscription-based web content filtering. You just simply add a tick and apply profiles to the firewall, and that will block out. For example, in terms of streaming, if you wanted to block Netflix, or if you wanted to block Spotify, or YouTube, for example, you could block those out between certain hours of the day and allow it during lunchtime, for example. So this is available without subscription. And this is again is a very powerful feature. Lots of customers are using this, and I'd encourage you to have a look at this feature, this application filtering in a bit more detail. This is a very powerful feature in DrayTek products. Okay, finally, let's take a look at wireless and mesh. I've only have a very quick introduction to this. So where is wireless used? Of course, we think it's used absolutely everywhere. So receptions, offices, public areas, schools, colleges, shopping centers, railways, waiting rooms, supermarkets, hotels. Most probably your phone is going to have an SSID that is going to cover a lot of these sites, a lot of these environments. So when you go there, you don't have to keep putting in the codes. They'll just automatically connect you in. I know that I have one for my phone on my local supermarket, and when I go there, it just automatically connects me in. But there are lots of other places, airports as well, and many of them provide free Wi-Fi as well, so you don't need to use your data. Okay, but in terms of Wi-Fi, what does DrayTek offer? DrayTek offers 3 types of Wi-Fi solutions. One, you've got the mesh solution, which is a network based on a mesh, so it can cover all the access points are all connected together, and they give a wireless connection in a large or a small area. and it can cover dead spots, it can cover a large area, and if one of those access points goes down, then the mesh will just close in and just cover that area as well with the mesh configuration. So there's a lot of advantages to using mesh. You can also have AP based management as well, where management of the Wi-Fi is based on one of those access points, which becomes like a route for your Wi-Fi in that site. Or you can have router based. The router can manage access, and it can manage up to 50 access points on a site. So you've got three, actually you've got four as well, because you do have ACS, Viger ACS. ACS can manage access points as well from a central site as well. So you really got four, but for this slide, we've got the three ones that are managing those sites. Okay, and I think this is my final slide on mesh. In terms of mesh, you've got 8 access points that can be configured in a mesh, and they can be wired or they can be wireless. But wherever you have a wireless connection, you do get a little bit of latency, so that's something to bear in mind if you're setting up a mesh network. Mesh types can be a root mesh, you can have a node, which is a wireless node, or you can have an Ethernet connected mesh as well. And mesh will use the 5 gig frequency to communicate from access point to access point. So the communication between those access points is on a 5 gig. So if you're using 2.4, for example, then it doesn't, it doesn't interfere with the mesh communications from access point to access point. That will be using the 5G. Setting up wireless and wireless connectivity, there is a lot more to that, but I'm going to finish now my presentation. So I want to thank you all for attending, and I just want to see if there's any kind of questions that anyone has on any of those things. I probably ran through it a little bit fast, but there are a lot more features than what I've covered. There are a lot more functionality in DrayTek, but the key things that I wanted to kind of get over in this presentation was the VPN, the load balancing that you can do, and the content filtering, which are kind of like the key features of DrayTek. So, are there any questions that we can answer? Let's see. If anyone has, let's have a look. Okay, I can't see any questions. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? Okay, one of the questions is regarding Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E. I guess Wi-Fi 6 will be coming along. DrayTek do a lot of development work, and I know that they probably have Wi-Fi 6 in the pipeline coming along, but I'm not quite sure when that will be. Okay, let's see if there's any other kind of questions. Okay, let's see. Okay, is it possible to? Just 1 second while I quickly see if there's any kind of questions that we can help to answer. Okay, one of the questions is, what protocol would you suggest for Windows remote dial-in? You've got a range of, you've got a few options there. For myself, I use SSL, and SSL works very well. It's uses username and password, and as long as your username, well, as long as your password is fairly complex, and long, then there should be no problems using that. I use that with my home router. I have a DrayTek in my house, and with my mobile phone, I downloaded the DrayTek VPN app, and I use SSL, and that works very well. But you can also use IPsec as well, as well as using OpenVPN. So you've got a few choices there. But as I said, SSL or IPsec both work very well, and you should have no problem setting those up and using those. Okay, let's see if there's any other kind of other questions that we can help with. Okay, I think that covers all the questions as well. If you think of any questions, then please do contact Ru, or if you have anything that you'd like to learn more about DrayTek, do contact Ru. And I'd encourage you to look at the website as well, vicious.pt. There's a lot of DrayTek information and products and product catalogs on there. Also, as I mentioned, please do complete the survey as well. The survey will help us to build future webinars with content as well, and your feedback is going to be very, very useful. I did put a lot of content in this webinar, but I hope that you found that interesting and informative. I think if there is nothing else, we can finish with this webinar. Again, thank you all for joining, and we look forward to meeting you all again in a future presentation. Thank you very much.